Officer shot multiple times.
Deputies say the killer could be anywhere.
Today, we have identified Christopher Jordan Dorner as a suspect in this double homicide.
Rambling Manifesto posted on Dorner's Facebook page. He details everything.
There is a possibility that he's out here, and that's why we're out here searching.
A manhunt underway right now for a former Los Angeles police officer accused of murdering 3 people.
Held a pistol out the window and fired multiple shots.
Before we dive into this intense manhunt, let's talk about Christopher Dorner. Born in New York and raised in Southern California, Dorner was the only African-American student in his school from 1st to 7th grade, often getting into fights due to racial issues. As a teenager, he aspired to become a police officer and joined a youth program with the La Palma Orange County Police Department. Dorner graduated from Southern Utah University in 2001 with a major in political science and a minor in psychology. He also played football as a running back from 1999 to 2000, making him a big, athletic guy. In 2002, he joined the United States Navy Reserves, eventually reaching the rank of lieutenant and earning marksmanship ribbons for both rifle and pistol shooting. This expertise with firearms would later play a significant role in the events to come. While serving as a naval reservist, Dorner entered the LAPD Police Academy in 2005. Neighbors described him as admired, well-liked, and someone who generally kept to himself. He was married briefly, divorcing in 2007 without having children. Friends noted that he was friendly and often smiling, but some ex-girlfriends mentioned he could quickly turn hostile, indicating underlying issues. Now this is where the story takes a darker turn. In July 2007, during his probationary period, Christopher Dorner was paired with training officer Teresa Evans. They responded to a disturbance at the DoubleTree Hotel in San Pedro. Evans didn't think highly of Dorner's police abilities, considering him sloppy and clumsy, especially since he had accidentally shot himself in the hand at the police academy. Despite this, Dorner had earned marksmanship ribbons. He once confided in her that he felt the LAPD had discriminated against him as a black man, and that he intended to sue. The incident that triggered the subsequent events involved Christopher Gettler, a man with mental health issues. After arresting him, Evans warned Dorner about needing to improve his police work. In response, Dorner filed a complaint against Evans, accusing her of kicking Gettler during the arrest after he had been tased and had ceased resisting. This led to an LAPD investigation. Dorner's credibility was questioned because he waited a few weeks before reporting the alleged kick, which seemed retaliatory against Evans for her criticism. This pattern of behavior was notable in Dorner. He often harbored grudges and sought revenge against those he believed had wronged him. 3 hotel employees who witnessed the incident told LAPD detectives they didn't see Evans kick Gettler. Gettler was brought to the police station and received medical treatment for facial injuries, but did not initially report being kicked. However, he later told his father about the kick and reiterated this in a videotaped interview with Dorner's attorney.
Being interviewed and tape recorded with his permission is Christopher Gettler. Is that correct? Correct, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about the police contact that you had with the at the DoubleTree Hotel. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember being taken into custody by the police?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Do you remember whether there was a struggle?
Mm-hmm.
And during that struggle, were you kicked in the face?
Mm-hmm.
You have to say yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember how many times you were kicked in the face?
Once.
Okay. And do you remember where you were kicked in the face?
Right here.
Okay. And do you remember who kicked you in the face?
An officer.
Do you remember what sex? Was it a male or female?
It was a female.
When Gettler testified at Dorner's disciplinary hearing, his responses were generally incoherent and non-responsive. This made it difficult to determine if Teresa Evans had actually kicked him. The investigation concluded there was no evidence of kicking, and that Dorner had lied. Consequently, in 2008, Dorner was fired from the LAPD for making false statements, a severe consequence. Dorner appealed the decision with the help of former police captain turned attorney Randall Quan, but the appeal was unsuccessful. Essentially, it was a case of conflicting testimonies, and the police sided with the training officer over the probationary officer. After his dismissal, Dorner fell into a deep depression. He isolated himself in his Las Vegas home, cut off from family and friends, with nothing to do but brood over his situation. An ex-girlfriend had previously posted a warning on the website don'tdatehimgirl.com, advising others to stay away from him if they valued their sanity. She described him as extremely paranoid, always believing someone was out to get him. Given his personality, being fired, regardless of the truth behind the incident, left him very angry and resentful. It all started on February 1st, 2013, when Anderson Cooper received a package at the CNN office. The package contained detailed information about Christopher Dorner's grievances against the LAPD.
Do it!
2 days later, on February 3rd, 2013, the bodies of Monica Quan and her fiancé Keith Lawrence were discovered shot to death in Keith's car outside their condo in Irvine. Both had been executed with bullets to the back of the head. The police noted that Monica still wore her diamond engagement ring, indicating it wasn't a robbery but a close-range ambush. There were no signs of a struggle, and neither had enemies. Monica was a basketball coach at Cal State Fullerton, and Keith was an officer in the Department of Public Safety. They had just gotten engaged a few days earlier. The police questioned Monica's father, Randall Quan, about who might want to harm his daughter. Randall Quan, the first Chinese-American captain of the LAPD, had led a squad targeting Asian gangs and recently worked as a lawyer representing officers facing termination. Despite this, Randall couldn't think of anyone who would want to hurt him or his family. During the investigation into this double homicide, the police were puzzled as to why no one had heard the gunshots, despite the murders occurring right outside an apartment building full of people. It seemed impossible that no one had heard anything, leading the police to suspect that the attacker had used a silencer. Additionally, they discovered that someone had been stalking Monica in the days leading up to the murders.
With police on tactical alert across this region tonight, men and women in uniform as well as the community are remembering Monica Quan, a heartbreaking day as police search for a killer.
The very next day, Christopher Dorner posted his manifesto online from the Highview Inn and Suites in Manhattan Beach. This 11,000-word document lined his motives for the murders of Monica Quan and Keith Lawrence, and for the subsequent attacks he planned. Dorner claimed he wanted to clear his name and vowed to target members of the Board of Rights who had ruled against him, as well as the LAPD hierarchy that had enforced his punishment. He believed his former lawyer, Randall Quan, had been more loyal to the LAPD than to him, and he intended to go after Quan and his loved ones. In his manifesto, Dorner listed people who had wronged him throughout his life and those he would miss, knowing he wouldn't survive his planned actions. Among those he mentioned missing were friends, colleagues, and public figures like Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Chris Christie, George W. Bush, General Petraeus, Tim Tebow, Bill Cosby, Anthony Bourdain, and Charlie Sheen. Primarily, he named many LAPD officers as his enemies, essentially declaring war on the LAPD.
Police officer, and you hear this police chief in LA, Charlie Back, talking. He was asked, this guy was trained. He worked with the LA Police Department for a couple of years, not to mention he's a marksman, ex-reservist. Right. So he's trained well. He appears to know what he's doing.
He is. I mean, he was an officer, not an enlisted man, but an officer in the Naval Reserve. And so, yeah, he knows what he's doing. He knows weapons. He's a rifle marksman, pistol marksman in the reserves. He's been very well trained. You know, LAPD, some of the best trained officers in the country. He was there from 2005 to 2008. And I tell you, this manifesto, it scares the hell out of me.
Let's get to it. We have a couple chunks. I want to just read this first one here. Quote, you better have all your officers, radio, phone muster on or off duty every hour on the hour. You may have the resources and manpower, but you are reactive and predictable. Goes on. I have the strength and benefits of being unpredictable, unconventional, and unforgiving.
On February 5th, Christopher Dorner checked into the naval base in San Diego and was soon named a prime suspect in the double homicide. The next day, he abruptly left the base, bypassing the usual checkout procedures, likely aware that the authorities were closing in on him. Later in San Diego, Dorner attempted to steal a boat from 81-year-old Carlos Caprioblio. Pointing a handgun at Caprioblio, Dorner demanded to be taken to Mexico, saying, "I don't want to kill you, but you're going to take me to Mexico." However, unfamiliar with sailing, Dorner mistakenly threw the mooring rope into the water, where it became entangled in the propeller, thwarting his escape. He tied up Caprioblio, stole his cell phone, and vanished. On February 7th, at around 1 a.m., 2 LAPD officers were on their way to a protection detail for one of the officers named in Dorner's manifesto when they were approached by a man named Lee McDaniel. McDaniel reported seeing someone resembling Dorner at a gas station. The officers investigated and began following a suspicious pickup truck. Suddenly, Dorner emerged from the vehicle and opened fire with an assault rifle, grazing one officer's forehead before speeding away. 20 minutes later, Dorner ambushed 2 officers from a neighboring police department who were stopped at a red light. He fired 13 rounds of armor-piercing ammunition, killing Officer Michael Crain and critically injuring his partner, who survived after undergoing emergency surgery.
It sounds like your officers were completely ambushed. Was there any intelligence? Was there any warning, given that the LAPD was looking for this suspect? Did those officers in that car last night on their patrol have any idea that there was a chance this suspect might do something like
yes,
that? That they should be on extra alert?
Yesterday evening, the information was disseminated by the LAPD via the FBI's JRIC, the Joint Regional Intelligence Center. So all law enforcement agencies in the region were aware of that. We disseminated the information about the suspect and his vehicle and his intent to our officers, as I believe all agencies did last night. We are concentrating on calls for service that are of a high priority, that are threats to public safety, essentially. We're not going to go on barking dog calls today.
We saw at some of the perimeter of the scenes that officers from all different sort of agencies were carrying shotguns and rifles. I mean, how on edge are officers? I mean, they're being targeted, so how on edge will they be?
Well, I don't know that anybody's on edge, but certainly officers are prepared, officers are alert. This is a somewhat unprecedented, or at least a very rare occurrence for us, where you have a trained and heavily armed person who is hunting for police officers.
As you can imagine, Los Angeles turned into a bit of a war zone during this period. The police, growing increasingly paranoid, began to open fire on individuals they mistakenly believed to be Christopher Dorner. This heightened state of fear and tension affected everyone, particularly the police.
Just to go back a little bit, this has left cops so jittery in the area, and there was actually a shooting that was based on mistaken identity. Cops thought that they had this guy, and that resulted in a shooting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, Ryan, what happened was we were talking about those security details. Well, in Torrance, California, in the Los Angeles area, the police were on watch for one of the men mentioned in the list. A truck pulled up. They suspected for a moment that this was the vehicle belonging to Dorner. Basically, they opened fire. They hit 2 a newspaper delivery man was hit in the hand. The other one was okay. And they opened fire on another vehicle in Torrance. No incident, no injuries there, but an innocent victim, all of this, as police were indeed on very high alert, Ryan.
At 8:30 a.m. on February 7th, Christopher Dorner's burnt-out truck was discovered approximately 80 miles from Los Angeles in Big Bear Lake. Inside the truck, deputies found the charred remnants of 2 AR-15 assault rifles, a portion of a Glock handgun, and scattered remnants of a tent, a survival knife, and a camping stove. Surrounding the truck and scattered in the snow were hundreds of high-caliber rifle rounds that had exploded in the fire. Dorner had vanished into the mountains, evading capture. Authorities offered a $1 million reward for any information that could lead to the capture of Christopher Dorner. However, despite the incentive, Dorner remained at large. It was clear that authorities were resolved to not take him alive.
Good morning, Dan, from snowy Southern California. Bad weather here has made it tough on the search efforts. Authorities had to call their troops off the mountain last night, but they are out there in force first thing this morning. So far, though, the only fresh glimpse of the fugitive were new pictures taken 2 weeks ago. Surveillance cameras captured these images of Christopher Dorner. The trouble is, they were taken 2 weeks ago in Orange County, not far from where Monica Quan and her fiancé Keith Lawrence were murdered last Sunday. The last photos taken of Dorner before he disappeared. Signs like these, armed and dangerous, are on every freeway here, but so far no one has spotted him. Near blizzard conditions here in Big Bear Lake haven't helped. No eye in the sky, for one thing. In this weather, the helicopters can't fly. On the ground, not much better.
We're going to continue searching until either we discover that he left the mountain or we find him, one of the two.
5 days after Christopher Dorner's burnt-out truck was discovered, Jim and Karen Reynolds stumbled upon him hiding in a cabin. Dorner tied them up before leaving, prompting them to call 911 as he was gone. He stole their car, initiating a police pursuit. Despite his efforts to evade capture, Dorner eventually crashed the stolen vehicle. Subsequently, deputies from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department responded to a report of a carjacking of a truck at 12:20 p.m. and initiated a search for the vehicle, both on the ground and from the air. Fortunately, the truck's driver escaped unharmed.
I could tell it was Mr. Dorner. He came out of the snow at me with his rifle pointed at me. I wasn't going very fast, so I stopped, put my truck in park, put my hands up, and he came up and he said, "I don't want to hurt you. Just get out of your truck and start walking and take your dog." And that's what I did. I said, can I get her leash? And he said, "No, just start walking." It was clear from his demeanor that I wasn't one of his targets, and he just needed a vehicle, and I was happy to oblige.
When the truck was spotted, a chase ensued, leading Christopher Dorner to drive to and seek refuge in a cabin. Dorner then opened fire on 2 officers, striking both and tragically killing one, Detective Jeremiah McKay. Realizing his time was running out, Christopher Dorner barricaded himself inside the cabin, which was soon surrounded by police. Initially, authorities attempted to coax Dorner out using tear gas and loudspeaker announcements demanding his surrender. When he failed to respond, they employed a demolition vehicle to dismantle much of the cabin's structure. Subsequently, pyrotechnic tear gas canisters were launched into the cabin, igniting a fire. Moments later, a single gunshot was heard from inside. The fire burned throughout the night, and the following day, police discovered Dorner's charred remains within the ruins of the cabin.
Before we put that pyrotechnic chemical agent in, we made numerous PA announcements identifying him by name, asking him to surrender, telling him who we were, and asking him to come out. And then the pyrotechnic chemical agent was inserted.
Numerous assault weapons were recovered, as well as numerous semi-automatic handguns, one of which is a sniper rifle, a bolt-action .308 caliber, which is considered a very dangerous and high-powered weapon.
During the autopsy yesterday, the doctor who conducted the process concluded that the cause of death was a single gunshot wound to the head. We are not at this point ready to speak about the manner of death and tell you whether or not that it was as a result of a self-inflicted wound or another round. We will tell you that while we are still compiling the information and putting our reports together, the information that we have right now seems to indicate that the wound that took Christopher Dorner's life was self-inflicted.
Christopher's crusade achieved his desired impact. Numerous Facebook pages emerged, hailing Christopher Dorner as a folk hero for daring to challenge the law enforcement establishment.
LAPD was prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner yesterday. They burned him alive. Apparently, burning people alive is now considered appropriate behavior for the police. From the very beginning, Dorner had found plenty of sympathizers.
I just want to start off by saying that I perfectly support 100% what Chris Dorner is doing.
I read this manifesto, and I believe him.
On Facebook, more than 18,000 likes for a page titled, "We Stand with Christopher Dorner." On Instagram, the rapper Ab Soul spoke for many when he said this about Dorner's rampage. "This was a necessary evil. God bless you, sir."
People like anti-heroes, and we have a history of rooting for everybody from Bonnie and Clyde and Butch Cassidy.
USC professor Karen North studies the intersection of psychology and social media.
One of the things that social media has allowed us to do is to join conversations and not be as accountable for our opinions.
Christopher portrayed the LAPD as deeply racist, positioning himself as a vigilante uncovering police corruption. However, despite his efforts to cast himself as a hero, he was ultimately a murderer. Regardless of any grievances he may have had, whether legitimate or not, his quest for revenge resulted in the deaths of 4 individuals, including 2 innocent civilians.
It made me realize you are my winning lotto ticket. You're my best friend, you're my girlfriend, and I've had you all this time, so it's about time to cash you in.
I'm worth a million.
You're worth more than $1 million billion. So
what in the world?
Monica, Lisa, Quan.
Yeah, open the box.
Would you marry me?
Yeah.
Christopher Dorner was undeniably a cold-blooded killer. While he may have had legitimate grievances with the LAPD, embarking on a citywide rampage was not the appropriate course of action. As the manhunt unfolded, the LAPD reviewed Dorner's firing and reached the same conclusion. He had fabricated accusations against his training officer, justifying the revocation of his badge. This raises chilling questions about the potential harm Dorner could have inflicted had he retained his position within law enforcement and chose to act out in a similar manner. And with that, we conclude the story of Christopher Dorner. Thank you for watching. Your support means a great deal to me. Please share your thoughts on this case, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.